Hello, I'm Panthea, Guildmaster of Catalyst on Terramil EU, and I'm going to do a commentary slash guide on our most recent jailer kill. So that's post-nerf, and provide information that you'll need to help get this boss down before cutting edge closes. The first thing I'm going to go over is raid prep. So things that you'll need to know before even pulling the boss. So first I'm going to go through all of the raid markers that we have in the room and their reference points. So we've got 6 raid markers dotted around the middle just to represent each segment of the room. We've got a moon marker just as a reference point for P4, but that's not needed anymore, and a skull marker which is a reference point for P3. So the main kind of change in this boss is that there are now bloods in the room, so whenever Jailer smacks Azeroth in the middle, it will spawn bloods on the floor. Each of these bloods represents 10.5% of Azeroth's health, and healing it back into Azeroth will heal it for 5% per tick. There's 3 ticks in a blood, so you heal back 15% for the 10.5% of damage that's been dealt to Azeroth. And each tick that you take as a player will increase your damage and healing by 7% more tick, and it will also increase the damage you take from future ticks for 30 seconds. So to manage this blood mechanic, you will need blood soak teams. So on our spreadsheet here, we've got blood soak teams for P1. So we've got a left and a right group. So the right group is going to be the majority of your raid, and the left group are just going to be ranged DPS players, ideally ones with high mobility. So you'd want to put warlocks, moonkins, mages in those positions. In P2, you will have 2 groups of ranged, but these groups are 4 players each, and they will be on either side of the raid, whilst the majority of the raid is in the middle. So that will look kind of like this. So you've got 1 blood soak team there and 1 blood soak team here. And then in P3, you will just have the entire raid in the blood soak. As long as they're not spread out, you're going to be fine. Also got a lot of WeakAuras for this fight. So on here again, we've got note structures for how the WeakAuras are handled. This will be provided in the video description along with the WeakAuras. You need to have assigned people to go in the tank soaks. This should ideally be people that are melee DPS or people that are in like the right line, so the raid line, so that they can get in and out quite quickly. You will need at least 6 players in the tank soak, else you will wipe. And a last part to talk over with regards to prep is tank management. So generally on this boss, the way that I view it is that you have a mobile and an immobile tank. So a mobile tank will be a monk, DH, warrior, druid. An immobile tank will be a blood DK, a paladin. If you are unfortunate enough to have 2 immobile tanks, then one of them will need to run a mobility talent. So a paladin will need to run cavalier, blood DK will need to run wraithwalk to make them a mobile tank. So let's get into the pull, and we'll start from this point. So on the pull, we're dragging the boss away. Something I forgot to mention, warlock gateways. So we have a gateway from, let me just draw on the screen. So we've got a gateway from here that goes all the way over to here for the first blood soak, because the raid will get gripped onto this area here, and then your gateway out to the other side. And then if you've got 2 warlocks, you can pre-set up a gateway from cross to star for the second time that this happens. If you've only got 1 warlock, then they will need to do that themselves. The reference point for that is around 1 minute 30 into the pull. The warlock will have a bit of downtime to put the gateway down. Alright, so let's go back into the pull. So we drag the boss a little over to the side so it's on top of the gateway, so the raid gets gripped onto the gateway and can just immediately gate out. Melee DPS can greed a little bit of damage here. They can just wait until the cast is on about 2 seconds and then gateway out. Then here we've got our first blood soak. There's only one puddle here, so you'll have majority of your raid in this clump near where the gateway is. The people that are assigned to do the puddle soaking, you'll have your person triggering the puddle on the puddle, the person chaining that to the raid around where that 2 number is, and then your last 2 players will be just outside of a clump, chaining it all the way to Azeroth. So that will make a kind of a hook shape that goes around like that. Then you can see that in action. So a call for everyone to go into their spots, see that people have moved into their positions. And then we have our first tank combo. So this first tank combo happens right after the blood soak. You want your tank to be around here where I am, and the players that go into it need to make sure that they are getting knocked away from the tank to a safe location. That'd be like standing here, so you get knocked that way. Standing here, so you get knocked here. You definitely do not want to stand where you are adjacent to a hole, because you will just get knocked straight in and die and be an embarrassment. What the fuck? So here we've got our first set of bombs. So the way that these bombs work, you have 6 bombs and 6 holes to fill. There are 6 sets of triangles around the room, so your goal is to fill all of the holes. So our WeakAura will assign players as front, left, right, back left, back middle, and back right. So once you've got the bomb, you wait until your timer is 1.5 seconds or lower, jump in, and then get knocked out. You want to make sure that you are jumping in from a flat edge of the circle, of the hexagon even, and you are walking straight in, as you will get knocked back from the direction of your character. So where your back is facing is where you're going to get knocked. If you go into one of these corners, you're just going to get knocked into another hole and die. Then the line of sight around the boss there. So it's quite important that you have the boss against that side of the pillar, so that this whole area where we're going to, so all of this space, is safe from the boss. You can start to move further down. And you spread for the torments. You want to have kind of loose spread areas. You'll figure that out as you go. Melee will just pick positions around the boss. Then here we've got the second set of bombs, and we've also got our second blood soak coming up. So we've got 1 blood that goes from Azeroth to here, and 1 blood that goes from here. And at this point, you've got a choice of strategy. So you can go for a safe strategy and soak this blood slightly before the bigwigs timer, and that will make it so that your debuff drops for the 3rd blood set. Or you could just go on the bigwigs timer and extend your stacks to a 6 stack on the 3rd set. That does mean it's more damage taken, but you also do a lot more damage and a lot more healing. So the choice is up to you. We go for the safe option, so we soak slightly early. Got my WeakAura here telling us when to soak. And you can see there's the bigwigs timer telling us to start soaking. Then we've got our second tank combo. So this tank combo is placed against this pillar here, so that players can get knocked in relatively safe directions, and it's not really intrusive of the path that you're going to. Ideally, you want to get knocked in this direction with this bolded arrow that I'm drawing here, so that you're in position for the next set of mechanics. So the tank that takes it here needs to drag the boss in a specific way so that it ends up on this corner here, so that you've got a better positioning for the 3rd blood soak. But here you've got a 3rd set of bombs and torments happening at the same time. This is your first big mechanic overlap. So if the players go into the holes at 1.5 seconds or below, then their torments will blow up in the air and it's all safe. If they go in a bit before, they may land and people will need to adapt to a bit more damage taken. So you'll see here, torments blowing up, and we've got one just blowing up there in the air on the top of the screen, as you can see there. So boss positioning, try and have it so that he is where he is there, so that you can move to your blood positions here and you can soak without having to worry too much. And this is your next big mechanical overlap. You've got these lines for MCs, so if you get hit by 2 or more of these lines, then you will become mind controlled and need to be killed in combat rest. And then also we've got a tank combo coming up. So the tank that takes this combo should position themselves near the blood so that they can move around this hole. And the players that go into it should try and make themselves either nearby, so here, or they can move around that pillar with their lines. As all of the lines are coming from this side of the room, they're not going to interfere with anyone else. So they're not going to mess anyone over. There's going to be little adaptation to that. Here is our next mechanical overlap. So we've got bombs and then torments. So these people will fall on the ground with their torment and need to find a safe spot. So players should pre-spread for their torments here. And then the people landing will find themselves a safe spot on the ground. Then this is our second grip. So there's going to be a gateway here that will take us to the 4th blood. So this blood, you don't need to put it into Azeroth. We do, just out of habit of consistency. As you can see here, Azeroth is already on 100% health. So we don't need to chain it into Azeroth. Everyone can just be inside this AMZ and barrier and live. And use this to extend your buff to 6 stacks. You can see here, we're on 6 stacks. We're all doing 42% more damage and healing. Here we've got bombs followed by the last tank combo. So this tank combo we put on the edge here so that players can get knocked towards the next area in one of those 2 directions. And here we've got our last bombs, and then that's followed up by a torment. Drag the boss over to the edge, just so for the end of P1, melee can just spread along the edge and have an easy time and just DPS the boss the whole time. So there's those last bombs, last torments. And then here is where you will want to use health pot if you're below 50%. So at any point during those sets of mechanics, use your health pot, because then it will come back for P3 anyway. This is a high damage moment of fight. All of the healers are line of sight from everyone. So you just want to be healthy and not waste a combat res. And here we've got all of the lines. We've got melee spread around the edge, so all of their lines are pretty safe. Ranged are relatively in their positions. We've got a couple of healers in the middle. And then we're into P2. And just as a note here, the boss does automatically push into P2 when he reaches 60%. So if you've got high DPS, that may happen, and he will just pull up all of the pillars and do that last mind control at whichever point in the fight you are. I believe if there's already a mechanic happening, that mechanic will finish, and then he will push into the next phase. So here we drag the boss onto this first closed hole here, and we've got the first set of mind controls happening, and then tank combo, the tank pillar. So I've got a raid plan here just to describe how we're doing the movement in this phase. So we tanked this with a monk and a DK, the monk being the mobile tank, the DK being the immobile tank. So the monk will take the pillar that's far away, and we reference this as behind or ahead as we're constantly moving clockwise. So monk does the one behind, DK does the one ahead. Then we move the boss round to the next closed hole. Monk does ahead, DK does behind. We move it to the next closed hole. DK does ahead, and then Monk does opposite side of the room. And then we move it around some more. DK does behind, Monk does ahead. But these ones here, this 7 and 8, doesn't really matter which one you do, as Jailer will always pull up this line at the end of the phase, if you've gotten this far. So we've got our first set of mind controls. So some things to note about these mind controls. If you're a shaman, just don't stay with the rest of the clump, who should be just ahead of the boss. Move off to the side, tremor totem, you break yourself out of mind control. For the others, make sure you are in front of the boss, have slows and stuns ready. You don't want to use stuff like binding shot, as that will persist after the mind control is broken. If you're a warrior, you want to make sure you spear after you've checked that you're not a mind control target, because if you are a mind control target and you use Spear of Bastion, then you'll just start gripping all of the melee on top of you all the time, which is a bit bad because it becomes a hostile ability. If you're a Blood DK, you'd run Death and Decay slow. So here we've got them slowed and stunned. And then we've got our first tank explosion there. So you can see the monk got it and they ran over to the other side of the room and they're going to break that pillar. And then the one that I will be breaking as the immobile tank will be this one on this side. And melee want to make sure that they have somewhat assigned positions around the boss for torments in this phase. So if I go back to our spreadsheet, we'll see that all of the melee have assigned spots around the boss. Healers are just dotted around loosely, and our bloodsoakers are on their sides. So shortly after this, we will have our first bloodsoak in this phase, and this is different as you will shoot discs of energy from yourself, and if anyone gets hit by any of these, then it will deal AoE damage to the raid. So the way that this is managed is this horrible drawing. So you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those are your 2 lines of ranged players doing the bloods. And they will aim just past the pillar, the blood on the other side. So these green lines are from 1, 2, 3, 4, and you will see that they're all aiming to the same spot. And they are not hitting each other as discs come from all 4 directions, and they're not hitting players on the opposite side. So it makes the mechanic quite easy for them. So you'll see this in action in a few seconds when it comes up. So we got our blood soak and tank explosion here happening at the same time. So you'll see that all of these discs are not hitting each other, they're not hitting the pillar, and the other players just barely need to move from the range groups. We've got a knockback here, but this doesn't actually do a knockback anymore. And then we're moving the boss to the next closed hole. So here we've got our torment spread positions again, and then all the melee collapse under the boss. And then we've got our second mind controls. So this mind control just happens just after 4 minutes in the fight. So people with 2-minute cooldowns should save it, just so you break these mind controls really quickly, because you're not really gaining any extra uses, so you might as well just hold it for a few seconds. So then these mind controls just completely get deleted. Those players go back to their spots. An important note about the mind controls that I forgot to mention earlier is as soon as a player is broken from a mind control, healers need to dispel them, because all of the dots that they'll have on them, they do way more damage than anything else in this fight. So if you've got a Havoc DH, they're going to have Sinful Brand on them, that's just going to be chunking them down. And then there's all of the dots, so you've got Ignite, you've got just passive Cleave dots that are happening. Make sure you dispel these targets. And if one of them is one of the Bloodsoakers, and they're broken out a bit late, get ready to use Freedom, Tiger's Lust, stuff like that on them, or get ready to grip them. This is the 4th pillar that we're doing here, and then There's the knockback. Then we do the torments in this same spot here, and then we move the boss afterwards. So we're doing the torments here, and then we're moving the boss. So this is where I do 2 soaks back to back, because we've got one close and one far. And then this is a bit of a nasty mechanical overlap, because you have mind controls, torments, and a knockback all happening at the same time. The knockback doesn't knock anymore, so it's not as bad as it was before, but it's still a lot of damage in a short period of time. You really don't need to worry about these mind controls here, because you've got loads of time to deal with them. So there's still 10 seconds until the blood soak, so just deal with all the mechanics, and then break the mind controls. Just do mind control damage as passive cleave. Once the torments are over, then focus them. So here, this is where you need the mobile tank. As you saw there, the monk had to go all the way over to the other side of the room in a short space of time. If you've got a monk doing this, they can transcend back onto the raid and ignore the bloods. If it's not a monk, then they will just need to hang out on the side, dodge all of the discs, and then come back into the raid.
Oh, it's a mine trick.
Well, watch out, Amelia, watch out.
So here, this is what I would call the big move, as you're moving around a pillar to get into the next section. So the people that are doing blood soaks on this side should just stay on this side of the pillar until the torments are done. The people that are doing it on this side should stay around here, and then melee have this area to spread in. And these pillars, it doesn't really matter which ones you break. I prefer to break this one just so this bloodline is easier. And just as a note here, if you opted for the more DPS strat in P1, the boss may be around 30% here, and you can skip this blood set entirely. So what you would do is, as soon as the boss hits 30, drag the boss over to this blood over here, wait until he hits 30 and starts channeling the end of P2. Then you can soak this as a raid, because P2 is ended, there will be no more discs. So you get a free stack on the entire raid. And a little 6-stack extend on a couple of the blood soakers. But if you're doing the slow strat or your DPS is a bit lower, then you will need to play this as we've done here. So you need to make sure that all of the players are just past the purple marker that we've got on the ground, so they're all around where the play button is, so that they're not hit by any of the discs. And then you've got the last set of torments. There's no mind control here anymore, so you just spread, collapse under the boss. And you need to make sure that you are very careful of this hole here, as it will open. So that's the end of P2, and we're getting in position for P3.
Same place.
Where's the skull marker? It's over by...
So main things are, you want to make sure that you have a clean line over to this wall over here. So I'm just going to put down the skull reference marker for the range to stack on. This is where they're going to bait the first knockback. You don't need to drag the boss that far, just where he is. There is fine. Then baiting the knockback, and then you're moving all the way over to this blood. So here is where you want your mobile tank to have the boss, as there will be a chain snap on the raid. So all of the raid is going to be stacked up. The mobile tank has the boss, he's got the chain. The other tank taunts, and the mobile tank breaks the chain. Everyone stacks in front of the boss here to soak this beam, just so Azeroth doesn't die. You need at least 17 players in that, else the boss will just one-shot Azeroth and start walking to end the phase. So this blood soak, it doesn't need to go into Azeroth anymore. We've done it just out of habit, but you don't need to do it. So these bolts here, you don't need to worry about them anymore, because you shouldn't be getting them. And then you will have a warlock gate from skull to where you were standing just before. So the warlock needs to do this at some point in the fight. And then here you've got your torments, and these will spawn adds. You need to make sure that these torments are evenly spread. So you've got 10 torments. You can pre-immune these and have fewer, but it's not necessary. And you will want to spread so that you have 5 clumps of 2. So on this sheet here, you've got 5 distinct clumps of 2. I think I've got an image here. Yeah. So here you get a WeakAura prompt telling you where to go. And then you need to make sure that you're oriented correctly for this WeakAura. The way that we have it is the front line of this is facing the boss, so where he's come from. And then you will have 5 distinct clumps of players. So you've got left over here, back, right, and front left. And then this will leave a small safe gap in the middle for all of these players to collapse on after they have done. If you do not have it, if you're melee, just be in the middle. If you're ranged, be out here ready to bait the knockback. So we do this a little bit sloppy because it's been a month since we've last been on this boss from a summer break. So we've got the ads out, and then here we soak the blood, but we do 2 ticks on the raid to extend it to 5 stacks. We use this damage buff to kill the ads, and then we extend it to a 6 stack. So the ranged should all be stacked behind the boss to bait this knockback, because when knockbacks happen, it leaves debris on the floor in phase 3 and 4, and you do not want to be in that debris. And then here is where you will push the boss into phase 4. You want to lust for those ads, just so you get more than enough damage to make this push, as this is the common strategy now. So here you've got lust and 42% more damage, and all of the 3 minutes are back, and all the 2 minutes are back. So you're just going to completely melt this shield here. So you can see the boss shield's already gone, and he's already on 9%. So in this phase, you will want to drag the boss over to this area here. And then you've got all of these holes to put your bombs in. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 bombs, 9 holes for 6 bombs. Super simple. But if you get a bomb, you go in a hole. If you don't get a bomb, you stand in front of a boss ready for a meteor cleave. And also, there will be one person randomly that gets death sentence. If this person has a bomb, they will need to use personals, they will need an external. If they don't have a bomb, put bop on them, because that way they won't take any damage from the meteor cleave, but still split the damage. So the bombs go in, the meteor cleave happens, we get knocked back. The next thing that happens is a knockback bait. So in hindsight, we probably should have tried to bait this knockback on the edge, but we just baited it on top of us. We got more than enough damage to deal with this, even with 3 players dead. Make sure you're out of this debris area. And then the next thing that happens is we've got to dispel this debuff. So you want this dispel to happen ideally on this blue line. So it happens on the blue line, but it's way too far away from us. Once again, sloppy. Boss will usually die around here. You get bombs, just throw them into a hole, don't blow up the raid, and just finish the boss. That is the entire fight. Hopefully that is useful for you. I will have all of the WeakAuras and note descriptions in the video description. And in the next few days or so, I will be publishing a written guide on my website, tanknotes.com. And I will add that as a comment in the video once that is up. Thanks for watching, and